wrestling fans. My name is Brian Crazy.
I'm JC Styles.
And we're the F and brand of wrestling and entertainment here on YouTube.com. Thanks for tuning in once again. We are back with our TNA Impact Wrestling review for June 14th, 2012. And before we begin, please check out the official website of the F and brand at FightNationWrestling.com, and all the links to our social media and various YouTube and other internet presences in the description box below. It was a pretty good night on Impact. We'll jump right into it. But before we begin, also please, after this video concludes, leave your feedback. That's what makes this so great. Not only do you get to hear our thoughts, but we want to hear yours. Positive, negative, whatever you have to say, drop them below. If you have suggestions on how to improve the show, also drop them below. We are willing to hear any and all feedback. So let's jump right into TNA's Impact Wrestling.
Yes, biggest news out of the night. We start off, we see the return of the Bound for Glory series. If you guys do not remember what the Bound for Glory series is, it is a series of matches consisted of 12 wrestlers, stars in TNA. They go on a series of matches leading up to Bound for Glory. And at the end of the tournament or the series of matches, whoever has the most points will be granted a #1 contendership shot at the TNA World title.
Exactly. Just like JC said, it's a multi-man tournament. Well, it's more than just a tournament, because like JC said, we see a series of matches, and each match, the winning superstar gets to gain points. And that superstar who has the most points, like JC mentioned, goes on to the biggest show of them all, Bound for Glory in the World title, the main event. We start off the show with Austin Aries, Chris Sabin, and Zema Ion, in an Ultimate X match for the X Division title. This is a pretty damn good match. During the match, we see Sabin get injured. This is when it becomes just a two-man match. We see Austin Aries and Zema Ion go back and forth, and Austin Aries picks up the win. He successfully retains his title, and then he cuts a promo about wanting to become more. He wants to go for the ultimate prize in TNA Wrestling, and this is when Hulk Hogan comes out. And Hulk Hogan gives him an offer. It's a pretty big offer, though, and I mean, there's a lot to think about. He can go on to the next pay-per-view. He can go on to Destination X and be in the world title match, but to do that, to face Robert Roode, he has to relinquish the X Division title. It's not like he gets to go on to Destination X, and if he wins the title, he relinquishes the belt. If he wins, he's still X Division champion. He has to give up the title altogether to get that title match, and this is different. There usually isn't a stipulation like this in wrestling. It's something different, and I think that's what the fans are looking for right now, is something just a little different.
Take the hats off to all three competitors in this match. It was a phenomenal free Ultimate X match, which we don't typically get to see those on an Impact show. And I tip my hat off to all three competitors. Austin Aries, who hasn't had much history with the Ultimate X. Chris Sabin, I believe Mike Tenay said that he has been in 15 of these Ultimate X matches, and Zema Ion being in his first Ultimate X match. So there's a lot of history with the Ultimate X match on Chris Sabin's part, being part of those 15. Then we move into the next title match of the night. We see the television championship defended against the returning Hernandez, Supermax, and Devon. Good match. I was expecting to see Robbie E and Robbie T come jumping in like it has been over the last couple of weeks.
And Garrett coming to Devon's rescue. Exactly. That's been the program that they've been running for several weeks now. Yeah, Hernandez. He returned at the Slammiversary 10 pay-per-view to take on Kid Cash. And it was a surprise match. I didn't know really what to expect going into that match, but it was actually a great contest. And the match tonight was actually pretty solid for the first couple minutes. The finish was a little bumbled, but two guys that probably haven't worked together, in the last year, 2 years, you know what I mean? Probably got a little bit of ring rust when it comes to competing against one another, so to speak. But Devon picked up a win over Hernandez nonetheless. He retained the television title, and I really like the weekly television title defenses. And I like that they brought another player into the mix with Hernandez. Exactly. Not only is it Robbie E, Robbie T, like you mentioned, but we got to see Hernandez, and hopefully next week we get to see another guy, and another guy, and another guy. Like the old NWA WCW days where the television title was defended weekly. That was the weekly draw. You turned into the program to see the TV title defended, and the chance that the TV title would change hands, because you didn't have to depend on watching just the pay-per-view to see that. Then we go into a backstage segment with Dixie Carter and AJ Styles, and they're talking about the whole situation that has happened in the last few weeks between them, and you gotta wonder, in the storyline, is this gonna end up being, the reason AJ's rise to the top, why he's had 3 world titles versus Christopher Daniels not being able to achieve the same amount of success, even though being a very similar talent, having a lot of similarities, And basically, next week, Dixie Carter and AJ discuss it, and they're going to come clean. So next week, tune into Impact, and I guess we'll try to find out the next part of that saga. You know what I mean? Then we go into an 11-man gauntlet battle royal. There will be 12 men in the battle Bound for Glory series, excuse me, but the 12th man will be determined in the title match. That's a little bit later in the night. It will either be Robert Roode or Mr. Anderson, depending on who is either victorious or loses that match. And it was a great gauntlet battle royal. You got to see a lot of talent highlighted in this, and that's what I like, when everybody gets a chance to work the card, even for a little bit.
Exactly. This match was for the jump start of 20 points to jumpstart them in the Bound for Glory series. We saw the 11 names in the 12th to follow at the conclusion of the main event. AJ Styles, Jeff Hardy, RVD, we saw Magnus, Bully Ray, Kurt Angle, the returning Pope, who is just fresh off of his filming with The Dark Knight Rises earlier this year. He will be a part of that movie. As far as what I've heard, he is one of Bane's lackeys in the movie, one of his right-hand man.
I heard the same thing. I actually provided an update on that when that broke several months ago on our sister channel, F and True Entertainment. If you guys aren't familiar with F and True Entertainment, not to provide a cheap plug, but guess what? I'm doing it anyway. It's my show, our show, so I can do that. F and True Entertainment in the description box below.
We saw Robbie E., Daniels, Samoa Joe, and the returning James Storm, who picked up a victory over the undefeated Crimson, giving Crimson his first loss in TNA in 14 months. We see James Storm pick up the win.
Even more than 14. It was 400 and something days. It was way past 14 months. And that's, not to interrupt you, but that's the one thing about Slammiversary that I really didn't understand. You took this guy, Crimson, and you built him up so much, and you had him bury so many guys along the way to remain undefeated, so many potential angles that were squashed to keep this guy in this top position. And then, all right, Storm was making his big return. It was Texas. It was Slammiversary, but an open challenge, and there was no build, there was no suspense, there was just guys squashed. What's the future for him now? Not saying he's my favorite talent, but what's the future for him?
I think having James Storm come back and pick up the win over Crimson, he said it tonight on Impact, post-match winning the gauntlet. He says that he didn't know he knew what wrestling meant to him, but it was up to his family to tell him when to go back to wrestling, and he felt that on the farm with his daughter.
Well, not just James Storm's return. I'm glad James Storm came back to Impact, and I think eventually we'll probably see him go against Robert Roode again, maybe even win the Bound for Glory series and go against Robert Roode, the reverse of what we saw last year when we saw Robert Roode win the series. What I'm asking is Crimson. What's the future for Crimson going to be? Now, you built this guy up so much, and then in an open challenge match, a Slammiversary, an unannounced match, there wasn't really too much build behind it, and that whole streak, 478 days or whatever it was, is gone. That's the question I'm asking, and I'll ask that to you guys, the fans.
Well, it was the same thing with when Kurt Angle came and beat Samoa Joe's undefeated streak. There was nothing really much left for Samoa Joe until...
But, Samoa Joe was world champion. He was already X Division champion.
Only 2 years later, he became TNA world champion.
But you know what I'm trying to say. You know what I'm trying to say. But we'll keep this review going. Then we go into, James Storm picked up the win, 20 points to him. Hats off. He has begun the Bound for Glory series. Bound for Glory is only a little less than 4 months away, if I'm not mistaken. And then we go into a backstage segment with Robert Roode, and then we go into a backstage segment with Kurt Angle and AJ Styles. And Kurt Angle is basically saying to AJ, hey man, I don't know what's going on with you, but you need to put this stuff between you and Dixie Carter aside, and we need to get focused on the game. We cannot lose these tag titles. I need you, brother, basically.
Exactly.
And embraces him in a hug. And then we move into backstage segment, another one with Brooke Hogan and Gail Kim. Gail Kim wants a rematch for her Knockouts title. Brooke Hogan's thinking about doing a 4-way match on Open Fight Night next week. And during this match, the one thing that really during this segment that really stood out to me is they're doing these really awkward shots of Brooke Hogan, they're like glamour shots of hi, and they're like, okay, like me and you were talking, right? If you didn't see Impact, we're talking, right? And then they're just like, ding, just me, it's just I'm not talking or anything. I'm just smiling. It was just different. I mean, everything about the backstage segments, the way they were cutting between the matches, I understand that they're trying to take it to the next level. But I don't know, everything was just a little bit different tonight. Not that it was bad, but this was just really, this was out there. I'm not gonna lie. I'm trying to make it sound good, but why were they just focusing on her?
Then the conclusion of the backstage segment, basically Gail Kim goes on and says, I'm a former Knockouts champion, the longest reigning Knockouts champion in TNA history. I have a guaranteed rematch clause. And then she goes, well, you are guaranteed a rematch, but it depends on when and where I'm ready to fit to give that to you. Since you don't want to compete in the Fatal 4-Way next week, then I will let you know when I feel deemed necessary you are ready for your Knockouts Championship rematch.
Exactly. You couldn't have summed it up better. And this is after several awkward,
glamour shots.
Hi. And then we go into Knockouts action. We see Miss Tessmacher in a non-title match go against Madison Rayne. And Miss Tessmacher picked up a quick, decisive victory over Madison Rayne. And then we go into the TNA title match. We see Robert Roode square off against Mr. Anderson. And the way that they hyped this match, I mean, we saw the #1 contenders match on the Slammiversary pay-per-view. We saw so much hype behind it, and unfortunately, I just felt like the match was just a little short. I felt like it could have been a little bit longer. I felt like the match just wasn't booked as strong as it could have been, and this would have been a really good place to put over Mr. Anderson. Maybe, well, I understand what they're doing. They want to put Austin Aries versus Robert Roode, but I think the shame about it is Austin Aries has what it takes to potentially carry the company, but the way they look like it is Robert Roode can actually hold the title to Bound for Glory, so James Storm can face him if he wins this series.
And if Austin Aries decides to relinquish the TNA X Division Championship, not only is there a big chance he's going to lose at Destination X, but he's also not going to be X Division Champion anymore.
And who's going to fill that void right now?
Exactly.
I mean, you've got the Motor City Machine Gunn, because you got to think his tag team partners left. So you got Sabin, who looks like he got screwed up in the match tonight.
Exactly.
So that's no good. Robbie E's in the TV title picture, former X Division champion though. Zema Ion? No. I mean, I like Zema Ion when he first broke in, but when he started doing the whole thing, no.
Then at the conclusion of the match, we see Robert Roode retain, and then we move into the final moment of the night. We see Sting come out, talks about what it was, how Slammiversary was the biggest night of his career, how it felt good, and it felt like he came to a full circle, that he's being inducted in the TNA Hall of Fame. And then just as he starts getting a little bit more emotional, 3 guys wearing ski masks jump in the ring and just attack Sting to end the night.
Oh, just completely attack Sting. They beat him down, leave him lying in the center of the ring, and that ends the night. And I mean, it was pretty shocking. I was anticipating that something big was going to be going to happen, because this was in the main event spot. I anticipated Jeff Jarrett, though. I was really thinking that Jeff Jarrett was going to take an exception. He was the founder of the company, with Sting being inducted first. But no, out comes 3 masked men, like JC mentioned, completely destroys Sting and leaves him lying in the center of the ring. Who are these masked men? What is their tie-in? Why are they there? I guess we'll only find out in weeks to come. If we find out the identity of these masked men before that happens, of course, we'll provide you guys with an update, and we'll label it accordingly so we don't ruin anything for anybody that doesn't want a spoiler. But, guys, I hope we gave you some of our thoughts. Now we want to hear yours. Thank you for checking out this video. Thank you for being loyal fans and subscribers of the F and brand of wrestling and entertainment here on YouTube.com. My name is Brian Crazy.
I'm JC Styles.
Thank you for watching. Hope you have a great night, and we'll catch you tomorrow with our Friday Night SmackDown review.